So Evan, I'm going to let you just take it from here and spend about 10 minutes talking about your background and beginning of Reboot, your research, and also how folks can get involved. Oh, and you're muted too. Oh, Evan, you're muted. Yep.
I thought we were practicing lip reading today. Is that off? I thought we were going to do that still.
You're good now.
What I was saying is, if you want to, you don't have to keep that slide up there if people want to, see me as opposed to that faked Photoshop photo of myself where I used to be skinnier. But it's not really Photoshop, but I was younger there for sure. But yeah, my name's Evan Owens. I'm a father of 3 amazing boys. I'm married to Dr. Jenny Owens. I live here just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And I really started Reboot with my wife back in 2011. And so I'll kind of give you the really quick flyover of how we got here and why our model is sort of unique and why it's spread. My wife's job at the time, she had been recruited away from Vanderbilt University Medical Center. She was is a doctor of occupational therapy specializing in traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. And so she was recruited to build the first of its kind mild traumatic brain injury clinic, which later became called the Center for the Intrepid. If you're around military culture much, you might have heard that, but at the time it was called the Mild Traumatic Brain Injury Clinic. And she was put in charge of something really super cool called the RTD program, the Return to Duty program. It's like the most dopest job I've ever seen. It's incredible. So basically what would happen is when someone would get injured in combat, they would usually want to redeploy quickly, but they had to go through a series of examinations and tests to make sure they were ready to RTD, to return to duty. And so she would put them through all sorts of pressure tests. I mean, this is insane stuff like Humvee rollovers, people running out of buildings, yelling at you in Arabic, land navigation examinations, tourniquets, all this incredible stuff. And every day she was coming home telling me these incredible stories. And I was running a technology company at the time, a software development business. And my heart just really fell in love with the people in our community. We had moved away from Nashville, closer to Fort Campbell, which is where we live now. And my dad was a Vietnam veteran. And so every day she would tell me these stories of just things that they were working on at work. And it was interesting because a lot of the questions that were being raised during her one-on-one meetings were actually outside the realm of traditional medical conversations. They were questions about the origin of evil in the world. They were questions about why do bad things happen? Why did she die and I live? She was a mom. She was this, she was the best of us or whatever it was, and all those sorts of questions. And those questions really traversed outside of traditional sort of clinical care. And she began to notice several gaps. She noticed one at this time in the war, 2010, 2011, no one was talking. The idea of moral injury was not a thing yet. There was this idea of soul woundedness that no one was describing. And number 2 is that as we've hit on like 20 times, there was a lack of peer-to-peer support. There was this disconnect, this idea that all of the help that you could get for your trauma, for your suicidality, for your whatever it is, all would come from the top down, that the experts knew what was best, that they had the answers, so you just go to them and they're going to help you. But yet when you look at things around like the Warrior Transition Battalion, which is where we originally began our work, you saw suicide numbers actually skyrocketing despite increased spending, all the new solutions. You just saw these numbers getting worse. And so we came up with this really crazy, really, really simple idea. We said, what if we could get everybody together in our living room, provide some spaghetti, have a conversation about trauma, talk about it through different lenses, sort of, the psychological, the social, the emotional, the spiritual, like all these different lenses. What would sort of happen if we did that in a true, authentic, loving, trusting community? And it was incredible. The first couple of nights, people were like, this has been more help than anything else I've done. And we were like, well, we didn't really do anything. We just kind of listened and sat there and smiled and, encouraged. And then they brought more people and more people and more people until pretty soon Fort Campbell called and they said, hey, we want to have you and your wife's program come on to the base. And they were like, what's it called? And she was like, it's called Evan and Jenny's House on Monday nights. Like, it doesn't have a very good brand name at this point. And the first night we had it, so many families showed up. I think at one point we had 50 or 60 families showing up in that first couple of weeks of the course. I mean, just exploded. And so we sort of realized there was this opportunity to create a decentralized approach to trauma healing, a model where we could empower peers to combine sort of clinical insights with basic faith-based support, accepting of all people, regardless of their background. They didn't have to agree with us. It was a sort of come as you are. If you want to sit in the corner with your sunglasses on, with your arms crossed and not say anything and act like you're pissed to be there the whole time, that's cool. We're just grateful that you're here, kind of vibe. And we continued the same model, provide meals every week, provide childcare, and have a conversation. So over a period of 5 years, we developed a curriculum of specifically focused on combat trauma, and the program began to grow. So finally in 2015, we both quit our jobs. We went from dual income, no kids, to over the next few years, 3 kids and very little income, which was a delightful little ride for us. And really threw ourselves wholeheartedly into the work, believing that connection was the cure, believing that if we could create micro communities all across the world, that we could mobilize the largest peer-led response to suicide ever built. That was the vision. So it started to happen. We started opening at other military bases, then in communities, and then something really cool started to happen. We were seeing huge turnout in these rural communities that had limited access to care, but had close-knit sort of word of mouth activity. And then in 2018, we happened to have a military group near the Pulse nightclub shooting. Some of the people who responded to that shooting were veterans who happened to also be kind of dual duty. They had also served as first responders. And so they came, and we were able to kind of out of that give birth to a new curriculum. And we launched a first responder curriculum that was totally new from the ground up. And then in 2021, in January, we released our third and final curriculum, which is called Trauma Reboot, which is trauma healing for anyone, all built off the same premises of this idea that peers can lead using a very refined curriculum. And all of our groups follow the same structure. They meet one night per week for 12 weeks. There's a leadership team who facilitates a conversation. All of them use a combination of live facilitation teaching and video-based teaching. Average group size is 12 to 15 people, and they meet everywhere you could possibly imagine, from bars to clubhouses to restaurants to church basements to government buildings, lots of other places that's pretty incredible. And so that model has continued as I was reaching out to peers who want to do more than play in a golf tournament, raise money. They want to do more than running a 5K or join some technology solution. They want to actually be an active part of the healing journey for other people in their life, or people they serve with, or people who live in their community or who belong to the same, basketball league or softball league or whatever it is they're a part of, right? Wherever they're at, they can be an influencer. They can be a voice of healing and help. And so the things that really make our program unique, besides the curriculum and the peer-led model, and sort of that intersection where we deal with those things, we really have sort of, when it comes to this issue of suicide, obviously, and I think we sort of hit on this recently, but this idea of suicidality being sort of a static data point that you can measure. It's a very volatile data point of what makes someone on the wellness specter of well or ill. That's a broad, there's a lot of social and cultural factors that factor into that. But regardless of those factors, oftentimes the first person who's going to respond to that impulse is usually a friend or a family member. And so we realized very early on that one of the things that we had to do is we had to get friends and family involved early on. And so that's why all of our courses provide things like meals and childcare, because we want the whole family to be able to attend on a weekly basis. And so that's one kind of unique identifier. It also helps give them sort of what I call shared language and conversational frameworks. So when they and their friends, they and their spouses, they and their caregiver have shared language to go through, it removes some of the mystery and anxiety associated with trauma, associated with PTSD, associated with suicidality. And so that's one of the big unique things. The second one I would say is that we have a phrase that we say, first they belong, then they'll believe that healing is possible. This sense of belonging is something that I think, reboot groups, they might come for the content and the curriculum, but they stay because of the community. And I think if Reboot had any one superpower, it is that we're really good at building micro communities of authentic, loving, trusting relationships. And we've really developed a system to be able to do that. And as a person's sense of belonging grows, so does their belief that healing is possible. And this includes instilling sort of a deep sense of duty to one another, that, hey, we're in this course together. We're in this reboot program together. Like, I'm not going to miss a week. I'm not going to be late. I'm not going to back out, because I'm here for you just as much as you're here for me. And sort of that's the initial belonging, which leads into the third kind of unique identifier of it, which is every participant as a leader. And that idea of every person is a leader is this idea is that from the first week in the curriculum, we're challenging course participants to do what their military service taught them to do, which is to lead. And so that might begin by just showing up on time every single week and starting a conversation with someone during mealtime. That's leadership. It might be being the first to share a vulnerable thought during the conversation. That's leadership. But then as they go into graduation, we provide a litany of volunteer opportunities within the group and outside of the group, whether it's doing outreach or facilitating or being part of what we call our hands team, which is a kind of a response and setup and tear down team. We have all these different teams and roles. And so there's this idea that as not only do they provide manpower and sort of culture, they contribute to the culture, but it's also giving them a deep sense of purpose, that now they're taking their pain, they're transforming, or maybe say recycling some of that pain into purpose, and now helping people that are, maybe only 5 or 10 steps behind them. And so, a lot of people ask, is it like AA? No, it's not really like AA, because it's a course, not just a support group. We certainly provide support, but it's a curriculum-based model. In terms of research, my wife leads all the research efforts. We work with University of Illinois to lead all of those. We've been really fortunate to have a lot of our work now is Reboot's model is evidence-based. Officially, we've been published many times, Journal of Military Psychology, Military Behavioral Health, Traumatology, others. And we've used a variety of different scales over the years. We've used a lot of NIH scales to measure kind of pre and post outcomes. So things of social health, sleep health, mental health, anger, pain management, social connectedness, quality of life surveys, lots of different data points that I won't bore you with today. But consistently, we've shown statistically significant changes in those areas, both short-term and long-term, and we've done qualitative and quantitative studies. And the qualitative ones are the ones that I get most fired up about, honestly, because they're the ones that capture the true, data points. They're good if you're trying to get journals, and they're good for research, but the qualitative data, the research that we've done qualitatively, is truly what shows the transformation of perspective. It shows the transformation from a wounded mindset to a growth mindset. And so today we've got, 23 reboot courses in 42 states now, I think, eight or 9 countries, 3 languages. We've had about 15,000 people go through our courses since 2011, which is truly incredible. That's not just veterans of veterans. That's about 7,000 of those people are veterans and family members. And lastly, our staff here, and myself and my wife, we are really the least critical piece of what we do here, because I could go to almost any reboot group in the country and no one would care who I was. And that decentralized model is really important, because the face of that group needs to be someone who is, and I hope you understand the origin of why I say this word, they need to be indigenous to that community. They need to be from and within that community. They need to be able to walk the walk, talk the talk. They need to go to the same grocery stores, deal with the same school issues, play in the same sports leagues with their kids, belong to the same, sit in the same traffic on the way home, whatever it is. They need to be indigenous to that population. And when they are, there's so many more, what I would say are accidental wellness checks that happen in the community that are really, really powerful. And so, we are constantly needing 3 things. We need people who want to step up and lead courses in their community. We provide all the training, all the resources, all the accountability, all the oversight, all the outcomes measurement tools, all the tech systems, all that stuff we provide to those local leaders, including ongoing coaching. That's number 1. Number 2 is we're constantly looking for new communities where we need to have a course. We are not, sometimes you can look at data, but a lot of times people, boots in the ground, are even aware of stuff that data is not even necessarily aware of yet. They know of things that are going on in communities before the data only tells you what was happening, not necessarily what is happening. And so that's another need, is if you know of communities where a reboot course is needed, we would love to help get one started there. We have funds to do that sometimes, depending on where we're at in the country. And the third, of course, is, we're always looking for funding mechanisms. It's interesting. Up until 2 or 3 years ago, honestly, we were seen as kind of the weird redheaded stepchildren, almost reckless. I remember being at conferences where, how dare we assume that everyday people could help someone go through trauma. After all, I spent years getting my degree to do this. Look at all the money I spent to do this. And there was sort of this idea that an everyday person couldn't possibly help. And I think that's changed dramatically as they've realized that the peer support systems now are all the rage. Everybody's getting into peer support, and we've been doing it since about 2010 at a pretty broad level. And so that's what our passion is also informing other organizations that are trying to do peer support and showing them how they can do it well and avoid some of the pitfalls that often come with peer support models.